On January 30th, 1979, a Boeing 707 lifted off the runway at Tokyo's Narita Airport, climbed into a cold, black Pacific night, and then, without a single distress call, without a single piece of wreckage, without a single body ever recovered, it simply ceased to exist. 6 crew members, 153 priceless paintings, a massive jet aircraft. Gone. Not lost at sea, not crashed on a mountainside, not forced down on some remote airstrip. Just gone. As if the Pacific Ocean opened its mouth, swallowed an entire airplane, and closed again without leaving so much as a ripple. This is the story of Varig Flight 967, one of the most baffling vanishing acts in the entire history of aviation. And the deeper you look into it, the less sense it makes. To understand why this disappearance is so shocking, you first need to understand the world it happened in. It was 1979. The Cold War was very much alive. Commercial aviation was booming. Jets were crossing the Pacific every single day, from Tokyo to Los Angeles, from Seoul to San Francisco, from Hong Kong to Honolulu. These were well-established routes, well-mapped, well-monitored. And yet there was a crucial difference between flying in 1979 and flying today. There was no GPS. There were no satellites tracking your position in real time. There was no automatic data streaming from the aircraft to a ground station every few seconds. There was no black box data being beamed to servers on the ground. If an airplane disappeared over the open ocean in 1979, the only way anyone would know where it went down was if the crew managed to get a radio call out, or if wreckage washed ashore. And for Varig Flight 967, neither of those things ever happened. When you fly over the Pacific Ocean today, you are crossing the largest body of water on the face of the Earth. The Pacific covers more than 63 million square miles. At its deepest point, the Mariana Trench plunges nearly 7 miles below the surface. In 1979, if a plane went down in the wrong stretch of that ocean, it could disappear so completely that finding it would be like searching for a single grain of sand scattered across an entire football stadium. This is the world Varig Flight 967 flew into. But before we get to the disappearance itself, we need to meet the aircraft and the man flying it, because their stories make this mystery even stranger. The airplane at the center of this story was a Boeing 707-323C, registered as PP-VLU, operated by Varig, Brazil's flagship international airline at the time. The 707 was a workhorse of its era. It had been introduced in the late 1950s and had become one of the most successful commercial jets ever built. By 1979, it was aging, but still respected. This particular aircraft had been converted from passenger service to cargo configuration, a common practice at the time for airlines looking to squeeze more revenue out of older planes. On that night, the plane was carrying a very specific and very valuable cargo: 153 paintings by Manabu Mabe, a celebrated Japanese-Brazilian artist whose abstract expressionist works had earned him international recognition. These were not prints, these were originals. The total value of the collection was estimated at over $1.2 million in 1979, which translates to well over $5 million in today's money. The paintings were being transported from Japan back to Brazil via Los Angeles, a routine cargo movement for a major artist. Now let's talk about the captain. His name was Gilberto Araújo da Silva. And here is where the story takes on an almost cinematic quality, because Captain Silva was not a stranger to aviation disasters. 6 years earlier, in 1973, Captain Silva had been a crew member on Varig Flight 820, a passenger jet that caught fire on approach to Paris Orly Airport and crashed. killing 123 of the 134 people on board. Silva had survived. He was one of the very few. Think about what that means for a moment. This man had already lived through one of the worst disasters in Varig's history. He had walked away from a burning wreck near Paris. He had continued his career. And 6 years later, he climbed into the left seat of another Varig aircraft and pointed its nose toward the Pacific. Whatever happened to Varig Flight 967, it happened to a man who had already looked death in the face once, and won. The crew that night numbered 6 in total. Their names, their faces, their families, all waiting for a plane that would never return. And now here is your first question to sit with as we move forward. Why does the flight of an experienced, disaster-seasoned captain vanish without a single radio call? Not even a broken transmission, not even static, just silence. January 30th, 1979, a Tuesday. Narita International Airport, Tokyo. The time is 20:23 local time, just after 8 in the evening. The aircraft rolls down the runway and lifts off into the darkness. The flight plan is straightforward. Tokyo to Los Angeles, a trans-Pacific crossing. Standard procedure for an aircraft of this type. The route would take the plane eastward across the North Pacific, eventually making landfall somewhere along the coast of North America before descending into Los Angeles International Airport. Under normal circumstances, the crew would check in with Tokyo Air Traffic Control approximately 20 minutes after departure. A routine radio call. Position, altitude, heading. Nothing dramatic, just the steady rhythm of communication that keeps the skies safe. Tokyo ATC waited. 20 minutes passed. The call never came. Controllers tried to raise the aircraft. Nothing. They tried again. Still nothing. They reached out to other aircraft in the region to see if anyone had heard from Flight 967 on the emergency frequencies. Silence. At some point, and we don't know exactly when, it became clear that Varig Flight 967 was not going to call in. And that was it. That was the last moment anyone had any contact with this flight. No distress signal, no mayday call, no emergency beacon activation, no final transmission from the cockpit. Nothing. The plane had been in the air for less than 20 minutes before it vanished from all communication. Now here's something important to understand. The absence of a radio call so early in the flight is deeply unusual. Whatever happened to this aircraft, it happened fast. Or it happened in a way that prevented the crew from communicating at all. A slow emergency, a gradual loss of pressure, a creeping mechanical failure would have given the crew time to transmit. Pilots are trained to communicate first, even in crisis. The fact that no call came out suggests either the situation was catastrophically sudden or something else entirely was going on. But we'll get to the theories. First, the search. When an aircraft goes missing over water, the international aviation community mobilizes. In 1979, the search and rescue capabilities of Japan and the United States were substantial. Military vessels, search aircraft, Coast Guard patrols. A search was launched across the vast stretch of North Pacific Ocean along the expected flight path of Varig 967. They found nothing. No wreckage, no fuel slick on the surface of the ocean, no life rafts, no personal effects, no cargo, no bodies. No trace of the aircraft whatsoever. This is staggering when you stop to think about it. A Boeing 707 is not a small aircraft. It is a massive machine, over 46 meters long, with a wingspan of nearly 44 meters, weighing over 100 tons when loaded. Even when a large aircraft strikes the ocean at high speed, it produces debris. Pieces of fuselage, sections of wing, seat cushions, luggage. Something. From Varig Flight 967, they found nothing. Zero. Absolute zero. The Pacific Ocean kept every single secret. To this day, decades later, not a single confirmed piece of the aircraft has ever been recovered. Not one painting from that cargo has ever surfaced anywhere in the world. No crew members' remains have ever been identified. 6 people stepped onto that plane in Tokyo. Not one of them has ever been accounted for. The official status of the case is missing, presumed lost over the Pacific. Presumed, because without evidence, nothing can be confirmed. And that word, presumed, is the word that keeps this case alive. Because in the absence of physical evidence, the imagination is free to go anywhere. And it did. When an airplane disappears without explanation, theories fill the vacuum. Some are grounded in aviation science. Some venture into darker territory. And some, well, some say things that nobody in the aviation establishment wants to say out loud. Let's go through them. Theory 1. Catastrophic mechanical failure. The most straightforward explanation. Something went wrong with the aircraft shortly after takeoff. Something so sudden and so total that the crew had no time to transmit. A structural failure, an explosive decompression, a critical system cascade. The Boeing 707 had a strong safety record, but it was not immune to serious mechanical issues. If a catastrophic failure struck within the first 20 minutes of flight, while the aircraft was still climbing, still pressurizing, still in that critical phase of flight, it is possible, though not certain, that the crew could have been incapacitated before they could get a call out. The problem with this theory is the complete absence of debris. A structural failure over the ocean would still produce wreckage. A fuselage breakup would scatter material across a wide area. The ocean would carry that material. Some of it should have washed ashore somewhere in the weeks and months that followed. Nothing did. Theory 2. In-flight fire. This theory takes on particular weight when you consider the captain's history. Gilberto Silva had survived the 1973 Varig fire near Paris. He knew better than almost anyone alive what an in-flight fire felt and looked like. Could Flight 967 have suffered a catastrophic fire in the cargo hold shortly after takeoff? Cargo fires are notoriously difficult to fight in the air. The 1973 Paris crash was itself caused by an in-flight fire. If a fire broke out in the cargo hold, perhaps ignited by something among the paintings or their packaging materials, and rapidly overwhelmed the crew's ability to respond, the aircraft could have gone down very quickly. But again, fire produces debris. The wreckage might sink, but surface material would remain, charred cargo, foam from fire suppression systems, something. Nothing was ever found. Theory 3. Hijacking. This one is darker, and it has never been fully dismissed. In 1979, aircraft hijackings were not rare. The decade before had seen dozens of commercial flights diverted by political groups, criminals, or individuals with personal agendas. The Cold War created a world in which aircraft could become political tools. Could Flight 967 have been hijacked and diverted to a location other than Los Angeles? The cargo, over $1 million in fine art, would have been a significant incentive for the right criminal operation. The Pacific routes of 1979 were monitored, but they were not airtight. An aircraft that maintained radio silence could potentially fly for hours without being definitively tracked. If the aircraft was hijacked and the crew silenced before they could transmit, and if the plane was subsequently destroyed or hidden, it could explain the complete absence of wreckage from the expected flight path. But no hijacking claim was ever made. No group ever took credit. No ransom was ever demanded. And the paintings, worth millions, have never appeared on any art market, black or otherwise, anywhere in the world. If it was hijacking, whoever did it got away clean and kept the secret for decades. Theory 4. Deliberate diversion. The most unsettling theory of all. What if someone on that crew deliberately diverted the aircraft? In this scenario, the flight did not crash. It went somewhere else. The radio silence was intentional. The disappearance was planned. Why? Motives are speculative. Financial gain from the paintings? Personal reasons? Political motivations? Or something else entirely that we cannot see from the outside? This theory is impossible to prove without the aircraft or any evidence. But it is impossible to entirely dismiss either, because the complete absence of wreckage, the immediate radio silence, and the total disappearance of an entire cargo, including priceless artwork, does not fully align with any purely accidental explanation. The paintings are the thread that nags. 153 original artworks by a celebrated international artist. These are not ordinary objects. They cannot simply be sold at a flea market. They require buyers with knowledge, with connections, with the ability to keep secrets. And yet, in all the decades since, not one canvas has emerged. Not one painting has been identified anywhere. Either those paintings are at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, or someone, to this day, is keeping them very, very well hidden. Varig Flight 967 is often spoken about in the same breath as other great aviation mysteries, flights that vanished without explanation and without resolution. But its legacy extends beyond the mystery itself. Cases like this one, and there were others in that era, helped drive the push for better aircraft tracking technology. In the 1970s and early 1980s, the vulnerability of long-haul oceanic flights to total communication blackouts was becoming impossible to ignore. Satellite technology was advancing. The argument for integrating that technology into commercial aviation was growing stronger. Over the following decades, aviation authorities around the world moved progressively toward systems that could track aircraft in real time, even over the open ocean. The process was slow. It was expensive. It was resisted by airlines concerned about cost. And then, in 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared over the southern Indian Ocean, and the world suddenly understood, viscerally, that even in the satellite age, we had still not solved the problem of aircraft disappearing over open water. The lessons of Varig Flight 967 had not been fully learned. After MH370, international aviation bodies accelerated the push for global, real-time aircraft tracking. New standards were adopted. New systems were required. Today, commercial aircraft are far harder to lose than they were in 1979. But Varig Flight 967 remains a ghost, a case with no closure, no answer, no graves for the families to visit. The 6 crew members who boarded that aircraft in Tokyo in January of 1979 were never found. Their families were left with nothing but uncertainty. And for the families of people lost to aviation accidents, uncertainty can be a cruelty worse than grief. Here's what we know for certain about Varig Flight 967. A Boeing 707 took off from Tokyo on a clear night in January 1979, carrying 6 crew members and over $1 million in original artworks. It climbed into the Pacific sky. It never made its first scheduled radio call, and it was never seen again. Everything else, every theory, every speculation, every possible explanation, is exactly that: possible, unproven, floating in the same vast emptiness where the aircraft itself disappeared. The Pacific Ocean is the largest, deepest, most silent place on the surface of this planet. It keeps its secrets well. It kept the Titanic for decades. It swallowed aircraft and ships and people across centuries of human exploration. And somewhere out there, or perhaps not out there at all, Varig Flight 967 rests, in pieces at the bottom of an ocean so deep that the pressure would crush a submarine, or in a hangar somewhere that never made it onto a map, or in the hold of some story that no one has ever told. We don't know. We may never know. And that, perhaps, is the most unsettling thing of all. Not the disappearance, not the silence, not even the missing paintings. It's the fact that in a world where we track satellites and sequence genomes and map the surface of Mars, we still cannot answer the simplest question about 6 people who climbed into an airplane one winter evening in Tokyo. Where did they go?